DeAndre Hopkins had some strong words for John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson during his introductory press conference. We talk about what he had to say and so much more coming up next on this Instant Reaction Live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this little impromptu Friday reaction stream, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more Daily Ravens podcast. So Monday through Friday, we have those episodes for you. Then we do go live like this when we have instant reaction, big news to talk about, live after every Ravens game. And of course, we do bonus episodes on the weekend, and we are going to have a bonus episode tomorrow. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's been one of those weird weeks, one of those busy weeks where free agency starts up. And I thought that DeAndre, is it just me? I thought the DeAndre press conference was at 1:30 today. You know, it was at 12:30, and then I was going to do live, but then something popped up. So then I got out of that, and I'm like, okay, is it time to actually go live? Should I still do it or wait for a bonus episode? We're going to go live. We're going to talk about DeAndre Hopkins because he had some strong words for both John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. So we're going to talk about what he had to say. We're also going to dive into still how he fits into this offense, and then talking about what the Ravens' next big move could be. If you listen to this morning's episode of Locked On Ravens with Sam Njoku, you heard some inside information from what he's been hearing about the Mark Andrews situation and how that could potentially be resolved even by Monday. We're going to talk about all that as well. So let's start off talking about DeAndre Hopkins here. And again, I appreciate everybody who tunes in to these live. And of course, if you can't catch them live, you can check them out after the fact, both in video form and in audio form. Let's actually start off here. Bill P talking about Arthur Millette. Why was he actually released? Was it for cap reasons, or was it so DeAndre Hopkins could wear number 10? That was the first piece of news of the day, was that DeAndre Hopkins was sticking with number 10. He wore number 8 in Kansas City, but obviously 10 has been his staple. He goes back to 10. So I think that'll look good. You have 4, 7, and 10. You have 4 to 7, that's +3, and then 10, that's +3 more. So I'm just trying to come up with ways to see if I could make up some nice little trio thing with DeAndre, Zay Flowers, and Rashod Bateman. But let's talk about DeAndre's comments now. John Harbaugh, everybody has mixed opinions, it feels like, on John Harbaugh, don't they? It's like, okay, some people love John Harbaugh, some people do not like John Harbaugh whatsoever. But DeAndre was asked about why he ended up choosing the Ravens, and he thought for a little bit, and he ended up saying, okay, well, Coach Harbaugh, man, Lamar, Derrick Henry, he goes from the head coach down. They compete their dogs, and I feel like this organization matches who I am. That's a strong endorsement of John Harbaugh. That's a really, really strong endorsement. And again, for people who might say, okay, John Harbaugh, he's not a good head coach, which in my opinion, I think John Harbaugh is a good head coach, but every head coach has flaws, right? And I think that some people are very much of the mindset that the Ravens can never win a Super Bowl under John Harbaugh again, which very well may be true. I don't know the answer to that question. But Harbaugh, and you can tell from DeAndre Hopkins and his comments here, he is still a very well-respected guy throughout this league. Still someone who can get players in the building. Still someone who has influence. And to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from DeAndre Hopkins in his press conference, was him talking about John Harbaugh. And, you know, the clips that we saw out there, he ended up endorsing John Harbaugh alongside Lamar Jackson, alongside Derrick Henry, where it wasn't like, oh, I came here just because of Lamar. DeAndre mentioned Lamar as a big reason why he came to Baltimore, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes here. But I think that out of everything we saw, and even us talking just, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, about John Harbaugh and the NFLPA player survey, he ranked pretty low in that survey from his own players talking about him and some of the things that, you know, is he good with his time? Does he listen to players? And he was ranked, what was it, 26th or 28th on that survey. Well, DeAndre Hopkins comes in here and says, man, John Harbaugh, from the head coach down, because again, it does start with a head coach. It starts with a lot of different things, to be honest. But when you talk about a head coach, what does it mean for a team? Well, yeah, you go not as far as your head coach takes you, but your head coach has a very big say in how far you go. And if you don't have good coaching, probably not going to go very far. John Harbaugh, again, does have his flaws. The time management has been an issue when some of the decisions he's made over the course of these last few seasons in the Lamar Jackson era, right? But to me, DeAndre Hopkins saying this, and maybe this, this is kind of more of the get the tinfoil hat on, but maybe this is more along the lines of, do other players maybe see this? Or does DeAndre reach out to other players and say, hey, come to Baltimore? And they'll say, okay, sell me on it. Why should I come here? Why should I play with you guys? And DeAndre says, oh yeah, the typical Lamar, Derrick Henry, the defense. But then John Harbaugh being a big selling point of that, someone who's been a veteran head coach since 2008, someone who has won a Super Bowl, although I know it was over a decade ago. Still, he has that under his belt. So this was the big point to me of the press conference. And DeAndre is a guy that's a competitor. He's a really big competitor. And the fact that he believes the organization matches who he is, that's a really big deal. And other than that as well, speaking of the process of DeAndre coming into Baltimore, he ended up talking about how when he understood that he wasn't going back to the Chiefs, when he figured out, okay, Kansas City is off of my list, he made a list. And DeAndre Hopkins had the Ravens at the top of that list. So that was a really big and important thing too, was that, DeAndre was going to have suitors. DeAndre was going to have options this offseason. But being able to get him at the price point they got him, and being able to get him in the role that they're going to have him in, not having to require him to be a wide receiver one, not having to have him play 90%, 95% of snaps, and hopefully stay healthy in a role that's going to be big. So I don't know who else was on his list, but DeAndre ended up talking about how, the Ravens were at the top of that. And I'm glad that the Ravens, it always felt like this was going to happen. If you listen to me on Locked On Ravens, I would probably say that, he is a guy that has so much experience. And while he is not the DeAndre of 5 years ago, there's still a lot more to DeAndre Hopkins. And he talked about that, where he said that if he didn't feel like he had it in him, he wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be playing, but he still feels like there's a lot more left in the tank. And to me, how much is left, I don't know. Because again, the fan base is pretty split on this, where if DeAndre is quote unquote washed or not. But I don't think he's washed. And I saw tweets on the timeline. I can't remember who it was from, but of people comparing some of these former veteran Ravens wide receivers that we've seen come in over the last handful of seasons, whether it be Steve Smith Sr. or maybe a guy like Des Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, Mike Wallace, Michael Crabtree, etc. I think that he's going to be more so, definitely not like Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin-esque. I compare it to a juiced-up Odell Beckham Jr. signing, where you're getting, I think, a better player than Odell was at the time, and you're getting him on a much better contract than Odell was at that time. So you're getting him for $10 million less than Odell, and I think you're going to get better production. Again, Hopkins hasn't been healthy in 3 of those last 4 seasons. The one season he was healthy, he put up 1,000 yards. And he also talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson. He said that Lamar being the leader of this team is part of the reason I came here. I know what he stands for and how he's led this team to the playoffs in multiple years since he's been here. He's led any wide receiver group he's had. That played a big part of me coming here for sure. Lamar being the quarterback. I don't know if this is anybody else when talking about takeaways from this press conference, but when he said he's led any wide receiver group he's had, and I know he didn't really mean it this way, but I just kind of had flashbacks to the wide receiver rooms Lamar Jackson has had over the course of his career. The room he won his first MVP with a rookie Marquise Brown and Willie Snead and Seth Roberts, to them not going out there and getting that big veteran wide receiver splash. Something that I've been very vocal about here on this show, of the Ravens need to capitalize on Lamar's rookie contract by going and getting him that guy. And even with him not being on his rookie contract, them going out there and getting him that guy. DeAndre is a player that I'm not going to come up here and say that, oh, it's the same as acquiring DeAndre when the Cardinals got him. No, it's not. It's not that. But as a wide receiver 3, and I talked about this on the show yesterday with Sam and Njoku and throughout the week since DeAndre was signed, look at the wide receivers that have been signed. Tutu Atwell, $10 million for 1 year. Marquise Brown, $11 million for 1 year. Mike Williams got $6 million for 1 year from the Chargers. The way the wide receiver market is booming right now, DeAndre getting that deal from Baltimore for $5 million, to me, that is a bargain deal. I'm not putting the weight of the world on his shoulders this year. I don't think anybody should. I expect him to maybe miss a couple games this year based off of the injuries that he's had. But for me, I think that with DeAndre, this is just a Lamar Jackson effect, and honestly kind of confirmation, although I think everybody's already known this, but it is confirmation of kind of the fact that, hey, look, Lamar, when Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator of this team, there were so many people who were commenting on, oh, well, receivers don't want to play with Lamar. Lamar is a guy that receivers don't want to go play with. That was never the case. It was never the case. And it was a bad take then. It's a bad take now. And you can see year 1 of Todd Monken, they get Odell Beckham on that big deal. I'm sure Odell would have gone somewhere else if Greg Roman was still the offensive coordinator. I'm not sure DeAndre Hopkins comes in to Baltimore here had Greg Roman still been the offensive coordinator of the Ravens. And I think we are seeing now, especially with what's going on in Los Angeles, with Greg Roman being the offensive coordinator, everybody pinpointed receiver as a huge need for the Chargers. And again, if you listened to the show yesterday, you might have heard some inside information from Sam and Njoku about what the Chargers could be doing, maybe even with Mark Andrews. So be sure you check that out. But now it's the same thing in Los Angeles. They re-signed Mike Williams. Everybody's talking about, oh, go get this guy. Go get DK Metcalf. Go get this. Go get that. And at the time of this recording, they haven't really gotten anybody, and I think it does have to do with the fact that Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator there. So it was really cool to hear DeAndre talk about Lamar. And again, if you remember when Lamar was going through his contract situation, he told the front office, he told the Ravens, hey, I'd love to play with Odell Beckham Jr. or DeAndre Hopkins. And the Ravens went out and got Odell. DeAndre was not in the cards then, but now he is. Lamar has gotten to play with both of his guys, which I think is really, really awesome. DeAndre said he talked to Lamar a couple of days ago, which was really cool. But he also, again, and here's the full quote, or at least the official quote about what he talked about with having stuff left in the tank. He said, quote, how much do I have left in the tank? They say you'll know when your body gives out on you. It hasn't given out on me yet. And for me, I feel like I ain't close. So again, DeAndre's a guy that I think will come in here, make an impact on the wide receiver room. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about what he feels like he can give to the wide receiver room, because it's an interesting conversation about what his role is actually going to be and how he can mentor players like Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on this instant reaction, a live edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We're back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher instantly reacting to DeAndre Hopkins and his first press conference as a Baltimore Raven, having strong words for both John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. We talked about those comments in the first part of the show. We're going to continue talking about what DeAndre had to say here. Again, whirlwind of a week all across the board for, free agency for the Ravens. Stuff has been popping up left and right. And again, glad we were able to go live here. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it today, but I'm really glad I was able to. And again, if you can't catch these episodes live, be sure you check them out in both video form and audio form after the fact. We have people coming in. We got Bill P in the chat. Laura, what's up? We have Brownie in here. What's up? I appreciate you checking in. Kieran checking in. We have a lot of people, and of course, Raven76B more in the chat as well. DeAndre talked about his ability to potentially lead this wide receiver group, or at least give to this wide receiver group. He said, quote, I feel like I can give a lot to this wide receiver group. If someone asks, I'm here to help and make everyone better. Those are some very talented young wide receivers. Zay, Bate, the tight ends that we have, Mark and those guys. The wide receivers specifically, they're young, they're fast. Those guys make plays. They're exciting to watch. I think people broke this quote down, or at least these quotes down in a lot of different ways. First of all, there's been a lot of trade speculation, trade rumblings on Mark Andrews. Again, for those that missed the episode from earlier today, highly recommend you check it out because Sam and Njoku gave us some great inside information. But he's due a roster bonus on Monday. And if the Ravens eat that roster bonus, they say, hey, Mark, we'll pay you that roster bonus to be on the roster by Monday. It doesn't make sense to trade him or get rid of him because you have to eat that roster bonus regardless of if you trade him or not, if he's not done by then, if he's not gone in some way by then. So I don't really know what the situation is going on with Mark. Again, we heard a little bit about it from Sam this morning, but does he stay on the roster? I think Monday is going to be that key point. But DeAndre mentioned Mark in his answer. That's what I'm getting at here. DeAndre mentioned Mark in his answer. So does that mean he's staying? What Sam said essentially was that there is trade interest on the market for Mark. There are some teams poking around, especially with Evan Ingram being off the market now. There's a real possibility that something does happen here, but nothing's guaranteed, right? So something could happen. Something also might not happen. Maybe they restructure. I don't know what's going to go on, but there seems to be some rumblings about Mark and what his future is with the Ravens, and it seems to be picking up steam. But the thing that I love about this answer from DeAndre is we saw with Odell Beckham in the locker room how much Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman benefited from having a vet in that locker room. We also saw Zay and Rashod take on bigger leadership roles last year because Nelson Aguilar was that veteran leader in their room. And not that Nelson didn't lead anything. I mean, Nelly was a really solid veteran presence for them, but they needed an upgrade here. And that's my other point is I've been talking about this all week too. Nelson Aguilar or DeAndre Hopkins, who would you rather have on your team as wide receiver 3? I think, in my opinion, at least, the answer is pretty clear. I think DeAndre is the much more proven option. And Ravens 76 be more waiting on breaking news today. Something big is brewing. Could happen. We'll see. Could happen, could not. But I think Mark is the name that everybody's floating around right now. So a lot of possibilities there. But do the Ravens even add someone else in this wide receiver group? With Tylan Wallace being back, you have 5 wide receivers. Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, Tylan Wallace, and Tez Walker. My opinion, I think they add a mid-round wide receiver in the draft. So is that like a Nick Nash, for example, a bigger-bodied player like that? If you have your sweet spot at 6 wide receivers, well, yeah, DeAndre Hopkins all of a sudden is the best veteran guy for that group, the veteran in that group. Because if you didn't bring in DeAndre, you didn't want to bring in a veteran, you wanted to go a little younger there, yeah, I think Rashod and Zay could have taken on bigger leadership roles. And honestly, I think they're going to again this season. Just because DeAndre is in the building now doesn't mean all of a sudden Zay and Rashod just kick up their feet and say, oh, okay, we don't have to do that anymore. No, Zay's entering his 3rd year. Rashod is entering his 5th season. Those are guys now who are coming up on vet status. I think Rashod already is kind of a vet here, which is crazy to talk about. And Zay obviously has had a couple years under his belt too. But I think with DeAndre and the experience that he's had, he has now played in the Super Bowl, obviously. I think it will have a really big impact on that room in general. DeAndre also talked about if he'll work out with Lamar Jackson just before camp starts on their own. Said, quote, he's a busy guy. Same for myself, but we'll find time to work before we get here. The first clip that drops of Lamar and DeAndre catching passes from each other, man, that's going to be a good day. That's going to be a good day. People have been dreaming about this for a while. I think every stop DeAndre has been at, people have been talking about, okay, well, could DeAndre be an option for Baltimore? From Houston to Arizona, Arizona to Arizona to Tennessee, Tennessee to Kansas City. And now, finally, Lamar gets his guy to play with. And so those workouts in the offseason, Lamar obviously does his thing. He has his own guys he works with, but he does have opportunities to throw with some of his wideouts before camp starts. So we'll see if they end up getting together as well. But DeAndre was also asked what impressed him most about Lamar's game. Said, I would say his football IQ outside of his running ability. He only threw 4 interceptions last year, if I'm not mistaken. It takes a very high IQ at the QB position for that to happen. If you play football, you know that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. Lamar had a great season last year. So did Josh Allen. Both those guys were firmly in the MVP conversation. Josh obviously came out on top in that, but Lamar had a historic year last year in multiple different categories. And the fact that you are now, it's essentially you're subtracting Nelson Aguilar, you're adding in DeAndre Hopkins. You've gotten, Patrick McCary is now gone. There are still other ways that the Ravens can improve this roster, but everybody was talking about wide receiver being that piece, that underrated, okay, the Ravens should probably make a move here. And these, again, are very strong endorsements from DeAndre. DeAndre and Lamar have had respect for each other dating back years now. Old comments have resurfaced of DeAndre talking about Lamar, saying it'd be an honor to play with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. And here he is today, suiting up in that number 10, that Arthur Millette number 10, to go play with him this season. I just think it gives the Ravens a lot of solid options because we are not in 2019 anymore or 2020, where, yes, the Ravens should have gone out there and gotten that big fish for Lamar. I'm not trying to dispute that whatsoever. But while it would have been nice to add a guy like that, like, for example, a DK Metcalf, that would have been a great move for the Ravens to make. You're getting DeAndre for literally $145 million less than DK Metcalf. Yes, it's 4 less years. And yes, DeAndre is not in his prime. DK, I would say, is. But this is a move that I think allows you to make others. And I see the comment from Karen here saying Marlon cleared all that space for a reason. The Ravens, and I didn't read the graphic right. I made a mistake on this morning's show. The Ravens are actually still $5 million over the cap, not under it. I didn't see the parentheses. It crossed my mind after the show. I'm like, wait, did I read that off right? So no, they're $5 million over the cap, still not $5 million under, but they still have avenues to restructure guys or extend guys like Lamar, Derrick Henry, maybe Odafe Owe, a couple of others as well. But I think Baltimore with DeAndre here has a lot of different options that they can use here. And again, if he plays 60% of snaps, 50% of snaps, even like 70, I think that's a good role to have DeAndre in. It keeps him fresh, keeps him healthy. And that to me is the most important part here, right? Keep him as healthy as you can, keep him as fresh as you can. And I think that's really exciting as well. But you also have the Derrick Henry connection to DeAndre Hopkins. Both those guys obviously played in Tennessee together. And DeAndre asked about reuniting with Derrick Henry, and this is actually the 1-year anniversary of Derrick Henry having his whole situation with Baltimore. Derrick Henry, with DeAndre Hopkins reuniting with him, DeAndre said, quote, "I'm very excited. Derrick is like family," and ended up talking about that he and Derrick actually worked out together down in the Dallas area, and their trainer called DeAndre this morning and trained with Derrick. Really didn't say Derrick had that much to say. He said, but that's Derrick. He's grinding. Derrick is somebody that, again, has a lot of connections with a lot of guys across the league based off of how much time he's had there, players running through Tennessee. Just, again, 2023, those two played together. And now just a couple years later, they're reunited. So I'm really excited about that possibility of them being able to pick up that chemistry. And DeAndre was asked about the photo that he posted back in 2020 and just what he ended up meaning by that. And if he had an answer to his own question about how many touchdowns Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry could score. And his answer, hopefully enough to win a lot of games. So I thought that this was an awesome first press conference from DeAndre Hopkins. Really excited for him to be in Baltimore. Not your typical Houston DeAndre Hopkins, but someone who I think can make a definite impact on this team. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about potential next moves to the Ravens. We can dive into Mark Andrews and any other possible options, including a bunch of former Ravens that maybe could make their return to Baltimore. Stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is sponsored by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here live with you, talking Ravens football on this Friday afternoon. Hopefully everybody has a great weekend in store. Purple Friday for the Ravens, and of course we are live here on the YouTube channel, but you can catch us after the fact in both video form and audio form 5 days a week plus more. Be sure you keep checking in with me here because this morning was episode 1,465 consecutively on Locked On Ravens. I've never missed an episode since starting this thing off back in 2019. So whether you're an everyday listener, first time into the show, or somewhere in between, thank you for all of your support. Let's move away from DeAndre a little bit here. We'll still talk about him a little bit, but let's dive into next moves for the Ravens. I see Daryl here talking about edge, corner, safety, and then offensive line depth. I think this is pretty spot on here. Obviously, the guard position is a position everybody's talking about, and I think that rightfully so. I've said this on the show multiple times. I would personally put 2 new guards in. Falele and Voorhees, I would not be the starters there. That would not be my opinion. I'd rather have 2 new guys come in. I feel like they're going to give Daniel Falele that right guard spot. And then I feel like they're going to have a competition for left guard, whether it's Voorhees. I hope a Tyler Booker falls to 27 and they take him there. But we'll see. And this is a good point here too. Mekhi Becton, that's a really solid option. I know a lot of people wanted Kevin Zeitler, myself included. Kind of heartbroken he went to Tennessee, but you can't have everybody. That's the unfortunate part of this NFL game you play here. Now, Karen asking about anybody incoming potentially, Jair, Calais, Judon. I was talking about those former Ravens potentially coming in. I think Calais makes a lot of sense. Or even 76 more says the same thing. Calais Campbell will be back. We need his presence. I think Calais is actually a pretty solid option for them at this point. They do need defensive line help. Michael Pierce obviously retired. That's a pretty big loss for them, both on and off the field, and figuratively and literally. Michael Pierce being a big loss there. Calais is somebody, you talk about who has what left in the tank. Calais is not even the Calais we saw in Baltimore, but he's still been so effective. I mean, it's not like he's lost a huge step, maybe like a tad, but Calais is still really effective. And I think for him, with the veteran presence that he brings, and plus the production, I think Calais makes a lot of sense for what the Ravens could actually bring to the table with him. Judon and Zadarius Smith, both still free agents, at least at the time of this recording, feels like those 2 could be solid options. I don't know necessarily what that looks like, but if it is to pair with Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy, look, I don't hate that whatsoever. Both those guys still have stuff left in the tank. And there have been a lot of good edge rushers that have been released over the course of the last handful of weeks here and that are just free agents where, yes, the market is dwindling itself, but then you also have options in the draft. So those are 2 positions I could see. And then, yes, corner and safety with Brandon Stevens being gone. And we'll talk about him a little bit on tomorrow's bonus episode because that Jets tenure is off to a weird start. Not anything crazy, but just Sauce Gardner making some comments. Brandon Stevens being gone, yes, Jair Alexander could be a pretty solid option for them if you're talking about, okay, Marlon, Jair, Nate Wiggins, that makes a lot of sense. Now, they'd have to free up a lot of money for Jair. I think his base salary cap hits are $16 million this year and $18 million next year, so I think an extension would probably have to come with Jair Alexander if that were to happen. But it doesn't feel like he's coming back to Green Bay. And while there are options for him with other teams, the Ravens love their outside corner rotations. They love getting really quality guys in, but maybe they find someone they fall in love with in the draft. There honestly aren't that many guys left in free agency for the Ravens to sign there. I mean, if you like a Rasul Douglas, for example, or a couple of other guys, Stephon Gilmore, those are guys, but I don't really think those are even upgrades over Brandon Stevens at this point. And again, drafts could be a really big thing here. You know, you have 11 draft picks. You could make something happen there. Maybe you trade up for a guy. And look at this. Brandon reading my mind here. Another good offseason for EDC. He's just warming up for the draft with 11 picks. And who knows if Mark ends up being off the roster soon, if they trade him for picks, maybe that's 12 or 13 picks. And then you have a lot of swings. We know Eric DeCosta loves having swings to be able to say, hey, we're not going to hit on everything. No team hits on everything. But the mindset is if you have more swings up at the plate, you're going to hit more balls. And I feel like that's what Eric DeCosta is working with here. And Sam talked about this on this morning's show, where if you're talking about, okay, what's the trade package for Mark Andrews if he ends up getting traded? From what apparently he's been hearing, and, you know, other people maybe have talked about this as well on social media, doesn't feel like the package is going to be all that great. You know, I know a lot of people are talking about, oh, could he fetch a 3rd round pick? Doesn't really feel like, based off what everybody's been talking about, that would be in the works. I feel like it, based off of the stuff that's been put out there, if Andrews is gone, it'd probably be for some level of day 3 picks or maybe 1 day 3 pick, which again, you have to weigh the salary cap money being freed up off of Mark as opposed to what he brings to the offense, which is still a lot. But what could you do with that $11 million? It can help you get under. Obviously, Derrick Henry extension would be big for freeing up money. So would a Lamar Jackson extension, you know, other guys we've talked about as well. But 11 draft picks, you get swings, and with Lamar having his big deal, and honestly, he's going to get a bigger one, and then Derrick Henry with whatever extension he frees up, with guys on the docket like Marlon with his restructure and Roquan with his big deal, Nnamdi Madubuike, you have extensions coming down the pipeline, hitting on your rookie picks. Because again, Isaiah Likely being on the rookie contract, Travis Jones being on a rookie contract, Roger Rosengard, Nate Wiggins, Zay Flowers, etc. Those guys at premium positions where you're seeing those markets explode this offseason. Explode. it makes all the difference to have, whether it be Pro Bowl level contributors, all pro level contributors, even just good contributors on rookie contracts for contending teams. That's how you have to build out your roster. It's not just like, okay, let's hit on a first round pick and then be done. You have to have day 2 picks and day 3 picks all hitting. And for me, I think that that's a big thing Baltimore does have. Karen asking, are we over the cap as of now? Let's talk about the cap a little bit. So as I mentioned, Brian McFarland, who is the Ravens salary cap guru, put out a bit of a cheat sheet on the Ravens cap with a couple of things not factored in because, there just wasn't there wasn't enough information on it at the time Brian put it out. But I accidentally read it off on today's show as they are under the cap. The Ravens, according to Brian, still over the cap, about $5.5 million. Now, that doesn't factor in the Wallace or Hummel deals. Also, doesn't factor in Michael Pierce being off the team. And right now, Brian is using the full $5 million for DeAndre, but he suspects it could be less due to the void years there. So right now, about $5.5 million over the cap still, even with the Marlon move happening. So you have to free up more money if you're Baltimore. Now, we've talked about where that could potentially come from, but if they make, let's say, 3 of those restructure moves, you can probably get 10, 15, $20 million under, even because, again, Brian's formula factors in the draft class, just putting money aside for the draft class, putting money aside for the practice squad. So that's after draft class. So if the Ravens have 11 picks, it's going to be a decent chunk of change towards your draft class. But if you get 10, 15, $20 million in, I mean, you could honestly go and make a big move there. I think the Ravens, in my opinion, have one very big to extremely big move left. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like. That could even just be trading Mark Andrews and they're done. I don't know. But it feels like they are taking now the necessary steps to, now they have to get under the cap. But if they go a little further, if they say, hey, we're going to restructure 2 more guys with max restructures and add on some more void years and get really aggressive. That Marlon Humphrey move yesterday was really aggressive. And so if they do extend one, and Brandon, I see you say it here, if they get one of those guys extended this offseason, it'll be really big because, again, it's kind of like the Bengals are going through this whole process themselves where they are being very stingy with the money, with T. Higgins, with Trey Hendrickson, Jamar Chase, and Jake Lisco. I use this phrase he said a couple days ago all the time now. He's my guy over on Locked On Bengals. He said, well, go you get a little skimpy on $1 million, right? You get a little stingy on that. You save $1 million today just to be $5 million down tomorrow because of how these contracts are all working out. So I would probably say that Baltimore should try to get these deals done as soon as possible. Saquon's deal reset the running back market, and Derrick Henry will get more because of it. Josh Allen's deal reset the quarterback market. Lamar Jackson will get more because of that. But you don't want to have that spiral. Honestly, there's not a running back, in my opinion, at least. I know James Cook is asking for a lot of money, and he's a really good back. But if you get that deal done before James Cook gets his deal done, you save a little bit of money there. So that's what I think is really good here. And I see Joe checking as well. Appreciate you hopping in here, Joe. You know you're the man. John, yeah, we talked about this. Michael Pierce being out, Calais Campbell coming in. I think that'd be a really solid option if Baltimore does make that move. You have a couple of other former Ravens. I see people talking about C.J. Mosley. I don't really see that for Baltimore, for being honest. C.J.'s not a great cover guy, and that was exposed during his time in Baltimore. I don't know what C.J.'s looking for on the open market here. I mean, if it's a vet min, then maybe you can talk about that move. But I feel like Baltimore probably wants to give Trenton Simpson another chance. If CJ comes in and it's just a very much, prove it 1-year deal for him, I just feel like he's going to want a starter spot. And obviously Roquan is their guy. I just don't think CJ makes a lot of sense for Baltimore. But maybe you could talk about, because they did sign Jake Hummel. That's one inside linebacker. I think they probably go for another in the draft or another special teams-esque player. I don't think they're really looking to make a big move at inside linebacker. I just feel like it's really going to be Trenton Simpson again. Now, that's a little risky based off of how Trenton's year went last year, but I think you have to balance this roster out, veterans and young guys. DeAndre coming in, being a veteran to that wide receiver room is relatively young. The Ronnie Stanley signing was really big because, for Ronnie, he's the vet in that offensive line room. There are so many different aspects of what Baltimore has now where they're not going to go out there and sign 15 more outside free agents. That's just not how they operate. It's never really been how they operate. But it doesn't mean that the Ravens don't have anything left. And plus, we know the Ravens formula. We know their formula, right? they like to see the market continue to evolve and then get players a couple months from now, even during the season, right as the season begins, they can come in and contribute. The free agency for some teams is first couple weeks and then they're done for the most part. For the Ravens, it truly is a months-long marathon leading up to the year. Jessica, I see you checking in. What's up, Jessica? Appreciate you hopping in. I see Brandon talking about would love to get Troy Hill at corner, bring back Worley. Yeah, Daryl Worley, the legend of Daryl Worley continues for the Ravens if that happens. I just think that you get, and I agree, Brandon, setting up for BPA as much as you can for Baltimore over this next handful of weeks leading up to the draft. It's going to be imperative. They don't want to feel like they're pigeonholed in any one position. So I'm really excited to see what they do there. And then, yeah, I see a bunch of other comments as well. Quarterback 2, I would probably say right now it's Devin Leary, but I hope they make a veteran addition. I would love Joe to come back, Joe Flacco, but I'm not sure. Jameis Winston also would be awesome as well. Justin Simmons is possible. It depends on, I think, what the Ravens do in the draft. Maybe Justin Simmons is a guy that signs a little later and the Ravens get him maybe after the draft. I don't know what his market is right now. DeMarcus Peters retired. I don't know. I'm not sure of Marcus Peters. I'll check that after the show. Actually, let's just look it up right now. Marcus Peters retirement. No, it doesn't look like he has retired. So yeah, it doesn't look like he has yet. But I don't really think that's an option. I don't think that's an option. Tyler's saying, what's a realistic free agent you would want them to acquire soon? I would probably say Calais Campbell. I'd probably say that's the guy we talked about a lot today. I think Calais would probably be the best option for them on the defensive line. I just think he'd come in cheap. He'd be that veteran leader for them. I wouldn't mind Matt Judon either. I think he could still provide a little bit of burst for them. So I think overall, Calais is probably the guy that I'd go for next. The defensive line is a bigger need for them. Plus, you have to remember, Roger Washington really hasn't been that impressive since he signed that extension, unfortunately, and Travis Jones is a free agent after the season. So that room, there's only really one guy under contract in that room after this season. So they're going to have to do a little bit of work on that room for sure. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. And, hey, I'm looking for that Lamar extension, too, 100%. Be sure you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and audio form. We got 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens content coming your way each and every single week. We're back here tomorrow with a bonus episode, so be sure you check that out. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.